Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this Fintelekt webinar on understanding RBI and FIU India penalties for KYC AML CFT. I am Arpita Vedekar, Chief Operating Officer at Fintelekt, and I have with me Pramod Khandelwal. Pramod, can we have you on?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So Pramod is, as you all know, a veteran banker, highly regarded compliance expert and Fintelekt trainer for several years. And we are very privileged to be guided by Pramod and his wealth of experience for this analysis. So Pramod, a heartfelt thanks right at the outset. So at Fintelekt, we have been tracking penalties levied by the Reserve Bank of India and the Financial Intelligence Unit of India, which is the FIU-IND, for a few years. And we have been publishing these findings in the form of articles or reports. But it's the first time that we are disseminating the findings through a webinar, which hopefully provides a more interactive and direct format for everyone. Today, I think we have more than 250 participants registered from different sectors of the financial economy. So thanks very much, everyone, for joining in the middle of the busy work week. We'll try to make it worth your while for the next 45 minutes. So what we're going to do is that I will start by walking you through some of the broad trends. And then I will hand it over to Pramod to get into sector-specific analysis and to help unpack some meaningful insights that you can then take back to your institution. We will leave a few minutes in the end for a quick poll and some Q&A. So first, why are we tracking penalties? I think if you've attended any presentation on AML anywhere in the world, you've probably seen at least one slide on penalties and enforcement actions. And why is that important? We are all aware of the very complex financial threat landscape that we operate in. And naturally, regulatory expectations and global standards around compliance are ever increasing. Unfortunately, penalties can hit the best organizations despite the best intentions for a very simple lapse, and the consequences can be quite damaging. So from that perspective, regulatory penalties should be studied, I believe, not just as isolated incidents or headlines, but taken together, they can serve as important signals of regulatory priorities, and they can highlight, which areas are being considered high risk, or which behaviors are being scrutinized, or where institutions are falling short. So these are valuable trends also for benchmarking. So, are you leading the way in compliance, or are you vulnerable to similar risks and therefore potential enforcement action in the future? Penalty trends can also help you shift your compliance strategy from being reactive and responding only after a breach or a penalty has occurred to a more proactive and preventive approach. And over time, I believe this insight can support more effective implementation of the risk-based approach and enable smarter allocation of compliance resources, whether through enhanced monitoring or improving training or strengthening internal audits. Before we dive into the numbers, a disclaimer. All the data and information that you will see today is drawn from official press releases from RBI and FIU-IND websites only. And this analysis is purely on best effort basis. So, if there are any errors that are there in it, please pardon it. More importantly, our objective is not to shame or to discredit any organization which has been penalized or which we will mention during the webinar today. The only intention is to draw lessons from the issues that supervisors have been flagging off so that they can become markers for other institutions to assess and to improve their own internal controls. So moving on, to the trends. This is the first year that we are doing a webinar like this. So we have chosen a time frame of the last 3 financial years from just after the pandemic. So we have covered the data for 3 financial years today, from 1st of April 2022 to 31st of March 2025. We do have a slide in the end for some of the more recent penalties that were levied in April and May of this financial year, but those won't be reflected in the data in the earlier slides. So on the right-hand side, you will see the trend over the last 3 years. The instances of KYC AML penalties have grown from 69 in financial year 22-23 to 86 in 23-24 and then 204 in 24-25. So this includes the penalties levied by the RBI and by the FIU-IND. We have not included penalties by the Insurance Development Authority, IRDAI, and by SEBI, simply because penalties by these two regulators have been fairly rare. In fact, the FIU-IND itself levies very few penalties. There have been just 5 in the last financial year. So primarily it is the RBI which has been dominating enforcement in the KYC AML space. Coming to the value of penalties, let me explain an approach that we have taken over here. When the RBI levies penalties for multiple instances of violations, it unfortunately does not provide a breakdown of the value of penalty by type of violation, or at least it's not available in public domain. So it's not possible to know exactly how much penalty was levied for the KYC AML part of the violation. So let me show you an example. This is a press release which I have used as an example. You can see 2 violations here, right? But the penalty value has been mentioned in the aggregate. So it's 1 lakh here. So if we consider this 1 lakh in the analysis, we run the risk of exaggerating the penalty value for the KYC AML part of the lapse. So what we have done is we've used a simplistic approach. We have directly apportioned the penalty value to the number of violations. So in this particular example, there are 2 violations which I mentioned. So the apportioned KYC AML part of the penalty we have taken as 50,000 rupees. I know it's not the most ideal representation, arguably, but considering the lack of data availability, we have tried to do our best. So now if we go back to the overall trends, now you see the overall penalty value, including this apportioned value. It was 10.39 crores in 22-23, 15.3 crores in 23-24, and has jumped to 39 crores in 24-25. There is a clear rising trend, but there's a caveat. The 39 crores that you see here in 24-25 is skewed by 2 large penalties of almost 28 crores on the crypto exchanges Binance and Bybit. And we'll come to an explanation of those cases later. And by and large, if you see a growing trend in penalty instances as well as penalty values, the value of the penalty is nowhere as high as the ones that we see in jurisdictions like the US or UK or even Singapore, Hong Kong in Asia. And often a few lakhs or a few crores is easily written off or treated as cost of doing business, especially for the size of organizations that are being penalized. However, the consequences to consider: reputational damage, heightened regulatory scrutiny after that penalty, operational disruptions as have occurred in some cases, legal costs, and the erosion of customer trust. The value of this may be more damaging than the monetary value of the penalty itself. So taking a view that the penalty amount is too small to matter to a financial institution would be, in our opinion, quite short-sighted. How do the two authorities, RBI and FIU-IND, compare? As I said, the FIU levies very few penalties, and these have come down. So in FY 22-23, there were actually 13 penalties, down to 11 in 23-24, and now 5. However, though the instances of penalties is lower, the value of penalties levied by the FIU-IND actually has been much higher than that by the RBI. So if you see the bottom row, the average value of the 5 penalties levied last year was actually 6.9 crores, as against only 8.6 lakhs for the RBI. And the same trend can be observed in the previous 2 years as well, if you see that. Now, if you look at penalties by type of reporting entity, we have grouped them into certain categories. So over the last 3 years, the largest instances of penalties have actually been on urban cooperative banks. And this group, we all know, has been under intense scrutiny for several years, especially in 2020 after the changes to the Banking Regulation Act, after which the urban cooperatives came under the direct supervision of the RBI. And the trend continued through the FATF mutual evaluation period for India. We will get into the specifics of violations for all these categories later on in the slides, but these are the broad trends. So NBFCs is another group which has seen a rising trend in instances of penalties. It's a small number, but there is definitely a rise. And then if you see every year, there have been some one-off penalties on specific groups, which probably reflects the regulatory focus at that point in time. So payment operators, their new reporting entities, they were penalized in FY 22-23 and then 24-25. And there were some large penalties on Ola Financial Services and on Amazon Pay. Similarly, payment banks were penalized in 23-24, including the large penalty on Paytm. And then crypto exchanges. Again, they were newly made reporting entities that were brought under the PMLA in 2023 March. And the FIU-IND has levied two large penalties on Binance and Bybit in 24-25. And one more exchange, Coinbase, was actually let off with a warning and not a monetary penalty. If you look at the average penalty values by sector, remember these are the apportioned penalty values, which I had mentioned in the slides earlier. Commercial banks consistently see a large average penalty value, which is proportionate to their size. But despite being the group with the largest instances of penalties, urban cooperative banks, actually the average penalty levied on them is very, very small. But we see a rising trend in that as well. And the one-off large penalties, which I was mentioning on payment operators or payment banks or crypto exchanges, in a sense, they actually skew the average total penalty value for the industry. So from here, we will get into sector-specific analysis of why these penalties were levied and what compliance lessons we can draw from them. So for that, let me hand it over to Pramod, and then we'll come back for some Q&A. Pramod, can I request you to take over from here? Pramod, are you there?
I'm sorry. Uh, Thank you, Arpita, for your excellent analysis of the trends. And at the outset, let me compliment Arpita for taking up this exercise for quite a few years of tracking the regulatory penalties, specifically RBI and FIU-IND penalties. Let me extend my hearty greetings to all the participants for sparing the time, and thanks to Fintelekt for providing me this opportunity of interacting with the active professionals today. Now, Arpita has brought out quite a few significant pointers from the data which is analyzed. One important pointer was that FIU-IND has relatively fewer instances of penalty as compared to RBI. The reasons for this primarily are, to my mind, number one, FIU-IND expects the sectoral regulators to do intensive monitoring of the reporting entities governed by them. And therefore, the FIU-IND picks up instances for penalty in very few cases, particularly when they are driven by some specific instances. Or say in case of cryptocurrency, which are crypto exchanges, which are relatively new entrants, they are the sector which are without any regulator currently. So FIU-IND is the sole regulator. Second aspect brought out by Arpita was in respect of quantum of penalties from two dimensions. One, globally, quantum of penalties in India is much lesser than the penalties being levied by other global regulators. Now, for that, we have to be really grateful to our regulators that they don't believe in penalizing us monetarily. They use penalties something like, a school principal will give a rap on the knuckle. See, boy, behave yourself. We are watching you. We want you to conduct yourself. So this is more of a tokenism which they use to give a signal that we better. While the approach by the Western regulators is, you have made so much of profit by violation, let me take away your profit. So you won't make any further profit by violating, which applies either for KYC, AML, or sanctions. Another aspect was about the crypto exchanges, where these being the new entrants, the FIU 5 instances we have counted here. Coinbase is one thing Arpita mentioned. In fact, there were 3 other penal actions by FIU-IND without monetary penalty. One of them being Coinbase. And the reason why Coinbase escaped a penalty, because Coinbase has since quit any activity in India. So FIU simply let them out with God. Now let's just try to look into what were the reasons which have been mentioned either in FIU-IND abridged orders or RBI's press releases about the specific nature of corruption. And the objective again is that these are the areas which have been identified as weak areas or where non-compliances have been identified by the regulator. Second aspect to remember is, even though RBI has penalized larger number of entities and there are more instances, if we look at the entire universe, this is only a small sample out of the entire thing. So the penalties instances themselves would have been much higher if RBI were to really intensely look into each player and go deeper into investigation. So that means the indicators which are coming here really draw our attention to the state of situation which is existing today and where we can take, as Arpita said, proactive action. So commercial banks, obviously in the banking sector, commercial banks deal with the largest number of customers and volume or value-wise also the transactions being handled are much larger. And therefore the compliance aspect in respect of commercial banks would be of greatest significance. But what appears in case of commercial banks would also apply to most of the, at least RBI regulated reporting entities. And in certain cases, even for non-RBI regulated other sectors. Now, as we find for now, periodic review of this category of accounts not carried out has been found to be quite common. The thought which occurs to our mind is that is the state of affairs which has been there in the last 2-3 years, while the risk category review has been on the obligations since several years. So by this time, most of the players should have had systems and processes appropriately geared up so that review of risk category of accounts is carried out regularly, and this should not be avoided. So this would be indicating that perhaps in the concerned institution, the policy itself could be defective, or the policy, KYC policy, AML policy is appropriate, but the processes are not robust enough so that there are no instances or very minor instances which may escape risk review of the risk categorization. Given the automated systems all of us are operating, even minor instances of escaping this review of risk categorization should ideally not happen. Customer records have not been preserved regarding identity and address. Now, OVD is the most crucial aspect of KYC ML, and if we have the situation where we are not able to produce records systematically, the record maintenance aspect becomes a question, which again points out among bankers and financial sector, maintenance of record is something very crucial to our nature of our business itself. For the purpose of the business obligations and in respect of KYC ML, we all understand that this record maintenance is also has certain legal significance when ED were to ask us the documents for the purpose of prosecution. Monitoring and disposal of alerts outsourced to another agency. Now, this not only is it a violation from the AML regulation perspective, because this is an activity to be carried out by the reporting entity itself, it also violates the outsourcing guidelines, where it's clearly said core functions cannot be outsourced by banks. And this is one of the core functions which the reporting entity has to do by itself. So these type of violations indicate that we need to look into the processes and procedures more rigorously, where compliance functions, the concerned business function, the AML and the principal officer unit, all of them have to okay, Suresh, we'll communicate in Hindi also. Okay, fine. I hope there is a request that we could, so if, pardon me if I get into Hindi sometimes. And I'll try to make a mix of both. तो इसलिए हमारी पॉलिसी प्रोसेसेस बहुत अच्छी तरह डिजाइन किए जाए, कंप्लायंस फंक्शन उसमें देखे, कंसर्न बिजनेस फंक्शन एंड एएमएल यूनिट भी उस तरफ ध्यान दें, तो इस तरह की पेनल्टी वायलेशंस हमारे रिड्यूस हो सकते हैं या then we did not allow UCIC to certain customers. Clearly यहाँ इंडिकेशन ये है कि there were certain instances found where UCIC was found unlocking. Now, so system था बैंक में UCIC देने का, UCIC अलॉट किया गया था जनरली, पर instances इसके को. So regulator has looked at it from the point of view of violation in certain transaction, कुछ cases में ऐसा. But it also points out to us that our system of UCIC which has been designed is not robust enough. आज जब हम core banking system हमारा customer data maintenance, customer onboarding process, everything is based on IT systems. So in that case, without UCIC allotment, no customer should get activated, which should be simple to do. So first, by this mere fact that ensuring that we have built-in checks and control, then in that case, this penalty or this violation could be avoided. Another aspect as between RBI and FIU-IND, when we go to FIU-IND, nature of violations, FIU focuses more on the reporting part, particularly STR reporting. Dusra, they would look into the basic requirements of the framework being there, designated director, principal officer, etc. And they could get into that, yes, some of the fundamental PMLA and PMLR related. The FIU का focus रहता है not on so much on sectoral direction, KYC directions of RBI या SEBI या IRDAI, बल्कि PML Act और PML rules में क्या directions. The most important part for FIU perspective will find STR reporting has been one of the common. The effective mechanism to detect and report STR. Tough thing, but definitely certain elements to be looked into, that the required element of having a software, RFIs selected and RFIs reviews and alerts. So thresholds in the RFIs, they are effectively designed and alerts are handled properly. These will be the components of the mechanism. Now there were entities found which did not have, means largely elements missing. That would be an effective mechanism to detect it. Now this happening after so many years of PML Act being there, naturally means that the adequate attention or appropriate, and that too among commercial banks. NBFCs में छोटी NBFCs होती हैं, वहाँ issues अलग होते हैं, but commercial banks by and large are of reasonably large size where this would be avoided. Alerts not investigated and closed properly. Yeah, definitely is a very difficult thing. Industry has, at least among banking sector, it's a pain in the neck for all principal officers. They have sleepless night. The alerts handling is really a challenge. Uske, what mitigation measures one could look at? How the system of selecting RFIs based on risk-based approach, which Arpita had mentioned right in the introductory remarks, that this is what we should be driving it, and then thresholds. And another aspect to be looked into is this alerts refers to monitoring at the transaction monitoring team or principal office. But STR, the ultimate objective of all these alerts is detection of suspicious transactions. Can principal officers or can the AML teams look at that? Yes. The organization could also look into the alerts at the what is known as manual alerts and at the first line, where during execution the detection can be done, which can be looked at. Then due diligence not carried out as per materiality and risk. Now, this is something how the due diligence is being perceived as such. Most of the cases today, what we find, the due diligence is what we collect in the, basically in the account opening form, at least for deposit account. In the asset accounts, the borrowers, we collect a lot of information. So that could be considered. It will also give us data from AML due diligence perspective. But for the liabilities account, we tend to collect very sketchy information, irrespective of the category of the customer and the materiality in risk category. And FIU India has come up this effect to my mind. This was the first time in recent years that this aspect had been brought in. Otherwise, they had not been really talking about applying the due diligence risk-based approach. Now, this could come out of, there had been an amendment made in the PML regulation rules, where specifically a clause has been added about enhanced due diligence for certain higher risk transactions, higher risk customers. And FIU goes strictly as per PML rules. So this is what it implies for all of us is we need to give a thought of differentiating due diligence for different type of customers, and also having a system of that when you change the risk category of the customer at the time of review, either periodic risk category review or KYC updation, then we further enhance the due diligence aspects, collect more information as it is. STRs or CTRs not filed in certain cases. Now here, my own take is STR not being filed, one could understand, yes, it could happen in some of the cases that STRs might be missed because alerts handling, it is a judgment-based thing. But CTRs not having been filed is something which is should not be happening when we have total automatics. Now, why can it? How it? I would just give an example of. Usually, this happens because we have got multiple systems, multiple products, and some of the products or and they are being handled in different systems. And at the time of designing for CTR data being captured, certain aspect being overlooked. That yes, there could be a cash deposit also happening in a loan account, while we have only taken the liability account of that customer and missed out the cash deposited in the loan account, and therefore CTR not filed, while FIU during the investigation would have looked into the entire aspect of the customer. So these are certain. Now, my purpose of devoting so much time here was that subsequently we'll find certain similar violation which we could just gloss over and focus more on new types of. Oh, I'm sorry. I jumped. Then cooperative banks. Okay, Sangeeta. Now, due diligence as per materiality and risk. Now, though materiality and risk वहाँ बोला गया, we could take it as per risk. We are all aware. Due diligence, we have three broad categories: normal due diligence, simplified due diligence for low risk customer, enhanced due diligence for high risk customer. अब enhanced due diligence for high risk customer क्या मतलब? एक रिटेल ट्रेडर है, किराना शॉप, ड्यू डिलिजेंस ऑफ किराना शॉप या ड्यू डिलिजेंस ऑफ अ वेरी लार्ज स्टोर और डिपार्टमेंट स्टोर शुड बी ऑफ डिफरेंट. किराना शॉप का लिमिटेड टर्नओवर होता है, उसका एरिया कस्टमर्स बहुत लिमिटेड होते हैं, एंड there would be certain type of large department store, variety of things. Then you go for either a small manufacturing unit and Ambani. Due diligence will be different because materiality of the transaction, the risk category. So differentiation. Now, due diligence, what it means? Due diligence is not merely knowing identity and who are the beneficiaries. Due diligence means I should have knowledge about the business. What is the level of business and what activities the customer is doing, and then what is the purpose of doing transactions with me. Certain customers deal with more than one bank, so what type of transactions and what is the business rationale of that customer. It involves certain aspects. I can't go much deeper into it for the purpose of the time limitation. Cooperative bank, periodic review again is the highest number here. Risk-based approach of periodic updation of KYC. Now, periodic updation is different from risk categorization. I'm sure all of you will be aware. This is referring to 2 years, 8 years, and 10 years. Now, even that fundamental aspect of, and that to cooperative banks, which are all cooperative banks are very old banks. They have been, so a KYC AML systems should have been well set by now. But still we find that, so what does it reflect? It reflects that there is not adequate system of flagging the accounts for periodic updation. And secondly, if data has not been available, customer is not responding, then it is not being paid attention. This can be the only two reasons. And this is despite for low risk customer, we have got such an easy way of updation, KYC updation now. So what it means is adequate attention to be paid. KYC records of customer not uploaded onto CKYC. Now, this has been put for cooperative banks, but this is now. CKYCR is something which I'm really surprised that why we reporting entities are not enthusiastic about. Making full use of CKYCR channel makes life easier for the customers and for the reporting entities. Repetitive submission or calling for documents is not required in the normal course. You can onboard a customer merely based on CKYC identifier as long as there is no change in the basic information of the customer, and therefore you don't have to even call fresh OBD from it when basic information remains the same. So this could be useful. Did not submit credit information to CIC, of course, for the borrower customer. CDD not carried out, and especially at the time of account opening form. So customer due diligence is becoming important. What are the documents? Priyanka will take up this question a little later towards the end, right? If you permit. Just remember, did not allow UCIC to certain customers, same thing that UCIC aspect. Internal mechanism for STR, we have discussed counterfeit currency reports not filed. Now, this is earlier, this used to appear even for commercial banks very well. Now, counterfeit currency reporting, it is not filed. FIU could know this only because that means there were cases of counterfeit currency, which FIU would have known from the system, but report to FIU was not. Now, for banks, you will be aware, for counterfeit currency notes, we are supposed to submit a report to RBI, report to the police, and report to FIU. All the three are important. Not filing with FIU-IND because it has been filed with RBI or with the police, maybe one thought which we should get over. Effective internal mechanism for UBOs for trust and legal entities. Now, for cooperative banks, yes, UBO may be an area where they are still catching up in understanding and implementing this, but UBOs identification is extremely important from KYC AML perspective for one simple reason. Enforcement Directorate, when they want, or any law enforcement agencies, in case of entities, will be interested in knowing who is the key person who drives that entity or who is controlling, or that is fundamentally the concept of UBO, ownership of control. Suspicious transactions, again, and CTR, so same aspect we can say. For NBFCs, also no robust software. Now, software requirement is there, PMLR as well as RBI intervention. So while monitoring in certain cases, and NBFCs, particularly smaller NBFCs, may feel that manually we can monitor, but smaller NBFCs also will need to go for some simpler softwares for the purpose of examining or churning out their transactions. PAN not verified, which is in fact, which is necessary from under several laws. Lapses in periodic updation of KYC, that is updation, and UCIC not allotted, we talked about it. So same thing applies. NBFCs have a wide spectrum, very large NBFCs and very, very small NBFCs. And therefore we can find that yes, such situations in NBFC, but everybody has to come on board. Entity is TD and its principal officer not registered with FIU-IND. Now, this was the situation found very much, in fact, particularly during COVID, where several entities were on. Companies were even deregistered for not filing some of the returns, which included certain NBFCs also. They have generally woken up, but still few NBFCs might have missed, and that is lack of awareness. And therefore, that awareness being there is important. Mechanism detecting suspicious transaction. This is one significant aspect. Did not consider an adverse order of SEBI for transaction and reporting obligation. What it implies is SEBI has already pointed out for that entity, and then subsequently it is found that there is still a gap in the thing. Now that becomes aspect which is serious that once having been pointed out by regulator, I have not taken it. Crypto exchange, Arpita has mentioned about Binance and private fintech crypto exchange both. Here, basically, what had happened, that these crypto exchanges had simply ignored that, yes, they are already had become part of reporting entities and no action was taken, and that is why the penalty is coming here. Now, FIU, let me just quickly mention another aspect between difference between FIU and RBI ये है कि FIU बहुत mathematical calculations 10,000 to 1 lakh per violation. अब वो violation कैसे consider करेगा? और दूसरा, in case of RBI holistic view लेता है और उसके under BR Act the penalty की maximum ceiling दी हुई है. But how RBI would determine? It doesn't have to go on mathematical valuation. It takes into holistic perspective, taking various factors. इसलिए आपको FIU के पेनल्टी हमेशा कुछ ज्यादा जस्ट क्विकली कुछ केसेस दिए हैं जैसे इंडसइंड बैंक का फॉर ओटीपी बेस्ड KYC के थ्रेशोल्ड रिक्वायरमेंट्स उसके कारण पेनल्टी अगेन देयर कुड बी सिस्टम कंट्रोल आरबीएल बैंक क्रेडिट कार्ड कस्टमर्स में ओबीडी नहीं लिया यूसीआईसी कुछ केसेस में नहीं लिया बैंक ऑफ इंडिया बैगेज UCIC allotment for these nationalized banks. And for all banks, in fact, UCIC means you have to take care of historical. So some of the historical cases they did not take care. Indian Bank, again, had customers where CDD measures were not taken properly. Again, this points out properly means आपको क्या, as per the customer risk perception, you need to take information and you may need to take the various documents to satisfy yourself. Amazon Pay, they again, like crypto exchanges, they didn't realize that yes, they were also being a payment system operator now. They are covered by the PMLR. Manappuram Finance, NBFC already knew the thing. But Union Bank was also penalized, yes. Did not have PAN at the time of customer acceptance. I have multiple items. UCIC again. Manappuram Finance also was penalized for domestic money transfer services, which was as the payment system of it, because that violation. NKGSB Cooperative Bank, current account transaction of a company without CDD. Now, opening an account without CDD naturally. Now, I think Arpita will and with this, I'll mention one Paytm payment. Yeah, out of all these. Union Bank cases already here, had pointed this out, so that is year 54. Paytm Payment Bank has been penalized by both. As we find here, FIU and RBI, and you can see the nature of violations similar to what we have discussed, but there has been a further damage. Subsequently, RBI has prohibited Paytm Payment Bank to run the deposit account. वो उनके सेविंग अकाउंट और वैलेट अकाउंट का बिजनेस खत्म हो गया क्योंकि only because proper due diligence or KYC aspect उन्होंने properly handle किया. तो मॉनेटरी पेनल्टी से ज्यादा डैमेज होता है जब आपकी बिजनेस नहीं पे और आरबीआई इस तरह के एक्शंस लेता है. HDFC बैंक में फॉर डिफरेंट रीजंस पर फॉर ऑलमोस्ट 8 months their certain line of business they were prohibited to expand their business. So that is the aspect. Now, Arpita, can we extend by 5-10 minutes for taking up questions?
Yes, Pramod, we can.
One is, what can the core purpose of outsourcing the alerts? It would be helpful if we can have any example possible. Core purpose of outsourcing the alerts. मनोज जी, आपका क्वेश्चन टिपिकली मैं समझा नहीं, अगर आप कुछ इलेबरेट कर दें, बट इफ यू आर आस्किंग कि आउटसोर्सिंग करने में क्या ऑब्जेक्शन था अलर्ट प्रोसेसिंग, तो बेसिकली अलर्ट प्रोसेसिंग किस लिए किया जाता है? अलर्ट प्रोसेसिंग किया जाता है टू डिटरमिन कोई ट्रांजैक्शन सस्पिशियस है। नाउ ये रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी रिपोर्टिंग एंटिटी की है और जजमेंट रिपोर्टिंग एंटिटी का है। अलर्ट प्रोसेसिंग कोई मैथमेटिकल फॉर्मूला से नहीं होता है कि सॉफ्टवेयर से प्रोसेसिंग करके। तो अगर वो फंक्शन में आउटसोर्सिंग कर रहा हूँ फॉर पर्सन्स हु आर नॉट हैविंग एनी आइडिया, तो मुझे रिजल्ट्स कंसीडर भी। एंड एसटीआर फाइलिंग इज द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट अंडर द एएमएल। आपका पूरा पैराफर्नेलिया, CDD, knowing customers, identity, due diligence, business information वगैरह, और फिर उसके ट्रांजैक्शंस को देखना समझना किस लिए है? आप प्रिवेंट कर सकें एंट्री ऑफ अनडिजायरेबल कस्टमर। मोर देन दैट, आपके थ्रू अगर कोई डाउटफुल ट्रांजैक्शंस हो रहे हैं तो आप उसको FIU को रिपोर्ट कर सकें, जिससे कि लॉ एनफोर्समेंट एजेंसी को FIU पास ऑन कर सके। There was another question about, I think someone had asked about the high risk customers, particularly. देखिए, बेसिकली जो डॉक्यूमेंट प्रिस्क्राइब किए हैं इज ओनली इन रिस्पेक्ट ऑफ KYC। उसके अलावा you will find in the master direction that we can collect and ask for all information and document to satisfy ourselves about financial status of the customer, activity of the customer. Now, what is the idea is, if they were to prescribe detailed documents and then that would become that या कोई वो सब डॉक्यूमेंट हर एक से लेना है, तो आप भेलपुरी वाले का भी अकाउंट खोलते हो, आप किराना शॉप का भी अकाउंट खोलते हो, और आप अंबानी ग्रुप का भी, और लाखों करोड़ों कस्टमर, क्या हैंडलिंग दैट विल बी इम्पॉसिबल। सो it has a discretion given to us. Now when discretion is given, एक इम्पोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट ट्रेडर है और एक किराना शॉप है। किराना शॉप में मैं उसकी बैलेंस शीट भी नहीं लूंगा। जनरली उससे जो आप अकाउंट ओपनिंग फॉर्म में एनुअल टर्नओवर कितना एक्सपेक्टेड है अकाउंट में और बैलेंस एवरेज कितना है, आप उस बेसिस पे देख लेंगे। पर वहां भी ड्यू डिलिजेंस ये रहेगा कि यस, यू आर इंटरैक्टिंग, जो इंडिकेट किया है कि एनुअल टर्नओवर अगर 10 लाख का है पर उसके उसमें 50 लाख का इनफ्लो आउटफ्लो हो रहा है, तो यू विल हैव टू रिव्यू द डेटा and they're satisfying. So, which is without taking document or small. कोई import export trade में, there you need to naturally, you can ask for balance sheet even for liability account when you are going to handle as import export transactions, as well as there will be throughput through the current account. Then even about, okay, how much duty was paid, or अगर export में है what duty drawback was claimed, and there are all such information which will support and which will satisfy me about the extent of his, देखिए वो किस countries में export import करता है, the nature of information, the granularity to which I go will depend on the risk perception, and materiality is in terms of value, the volume which is being handled, the value. Because higher the value is being transacted to me, higher the risk of that. Is it necessary to file nil return for FIU-IND for NBFCs? Today, FIU-IND has prescribed your format in the Fintelekt manual, clearly indicating where and what information you need to submit. So I think if you really go on the basis of that, then that would be really covered. So mostly FIU has put, now NBFC, you will not have the NBTR to be, cross-border wire transfer report to be given, and even NBTR, but you will have CTR to report, and you will have, I believe, naturally STR में रजिस्टर का कोई सवाल नहीं उठता है। अगर आपका suspicious transaction है तो आप फाइन करें।
I think Pramod, we're already over time.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of subject-specific questions, really, not much to do with the penalties.
With
So,
these penalties.
as promised, this is the one slide that I promised to share at the end, where we have some penalties that came in after we had cut off for the analysis that we presented today. And we do see a similar trend, rising penalty values and different types of organizations being penalized. Hopefully, we will cover this in the next year's webinar where we repeat our penalties analysis. So with that, I just have one simple last question to ask all of you. So I'm going to run that poll, and it would be great to get your responses on it. We also have a small survey at the end of this webinar, and it would be fantastic to get your responses if you can spare a couple of minutes to answer that as well. I think Pramod has taken a lot of questions as we went along. What we're also planning to do is to publish a detailed report on this, which we have been doing every year, but we will actually publish that report and share it with all of you in the next few days. So you will have all the stats that we presented today and some detailed analysis. So with that, Pramod, thank you so much. It was a pleasure working with you on this. And thank you very much to all the participants for joining us. And I hope that you're taking out some, great takeaways from today's webinar. And have a great day ahead. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Arpita. Thank you for having me on this. Goodbye.